Hey, good weekend to you. Welcome to Leading Edge. I'm Jerry Anderson. Good to have you along. With the election just a week behind us, we are looking already toward 2022, the midterms, and some very important things happening right now, this day, this week in Ohio that will have a big impact on next year's elections. Later, a political scientist joins me, but up first, they have been looking at maps, lots of maps down in the state capitol. They are maps of suggested congressional districts, which are being drawn by law based on the 2020 census by state lawmakers. But the maps are very different. Mia Lewis is following all of this very closely. She is the associate director of, do I have that right? Mia?
Yes,
I want to make sure I have that right. Associate Director of Common Cause Ohio, which along with the League of Women Voters, have really been leading the Fair Districts campaign in Ohio. Fair, we might add, as seen by the 75% of Ohio voters who passed a constitutional amendment calling for an end to gerrymandering back in 2018. I know you even testified late this week regarding the House Republican congressional map and specifically the way it splits counties. Among those with larger Democratic and minority populations. You made reference to Hamilton, folks, that's the Cincinnati area. Summit County, up Akron way. We know in our area, we've talked about it on the show, Mia, Lucas County, Marcy Kaptur's district, Toledo, Ohio. Why is that important?
Well, when you split counties, what you do is you divide communities. And what you're doing is instead of having one larger group that can elect the representative of their choice, you split them in half and then you kind of dilute their votes with voters who do not share their interests. Right. And then they become a minority in that district. And then they can't actually elect the person who would speak for them in Washington. So it's a way of neutralizing your opposition is by carefully deciding where you put that district line and putting it in such a way that it divides, it either divides your opposition and spreads it out, or it packs them all together in a way that they only get one district instead of two districts.
We're going to have 15 congressional seats. We're losing one based on the census. They should be, all of these districts should be about the same population-wise. Mm-hmm. And when possible, communities, as we've just heard here, and counties should be left intact. That's actually in the law, isn't it?
Absolutely. So that constitutional amendment that you referred to that passed in 2018 by such a high number, it required that counties be kept whole. 65 counties have to be kept whole. And then there's a certain number that can be split once. And then there are a certain number that are allowed to be split twice. But it's basically saying do as few splits as you possibly can. And it is quite possible to do fewer splits than are in these maps that have been put forward by the House GOP and the Senate GOP.
I'm not saying any of this is easy. I'm really not. But there are services out there. Mia Lewis, my guest, Associate Director, Common Cause Ohio. There are services out there scoring these maps for the very things the ballot measure of 2018 called for. And amazingly, maps which make the Ohio delegation more representative of the Ohio vote also score the highest. So this can be done. Make no mistake.
Yes, it absolutely can be done. Yeah. So Common Cause Ohio and the League, as part of Fair Districts, we had a mapping competition. And it was really wonderful to see citizens of Ohio and actually some people from outside of Ohio sit down and work really hard to think, how can we draw a map with 15 congressional districts that keeps communities together, that gives a proportional ratio of the vote of Democrats to Republican that roughly represents how Ohioans actually vote, that makes sure that minority voters have a voice, that has compact districts, all these different criteria, and they managed to do really well. And their map scored very high.
Yeah, you want more points on this scoring. And there was actually a map that I think is the one you testified about, Mia Lewis, correct me if I'm wrong. One of the maps scored is 0.
Yes. The House Republican map scored a 0 on proportionality on one of the criteria. So
just so I may, and I also want to follow up, I heard you right. You do buy the 55-45 argument. We're going to end up with more Republican seats, and probably we should because they have earned it. That is to say, in statewide votes in recent
Yes.
years, that's about the proportion of Ohio voters by party, 55 to 45. I mean, right now, the GOP, as you well know, holds 75% of our US House seats. And the maps that I've seen so far seem to protect that. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, actually, they increase their percentage. So the maps that have been put forward, instead of being, so we have 15 seats now instead of 16.
Right.
And so you would expect an 8-7 split if you were going with that 55-45 percentage, which just honors how Ohioans have actually voted in statewide races
Right.
over the past 10 years. Instead of going with 8-7, the Republicans have put forward maps that are 13-2. Or 12-3, and they do contain some competitive districts, but as I think you referred to earlier, there's a difference between competitive at a 10-point advantage and competitive at a 1-point advantage. So some of the competitive seats aren't really that competitive, and they all favor Republicans.
All right, we're going to take a break. She's Mia Lewis, Associate Director, Common Cause Ohio. They're working really hard on getting fair districts here in the state of Ohio, which we voted for, folks, just a few years ago. Need to take a break. I'll be right back. This is Leading Edge.